of staff and organization. Girish? You can ask them and they will put the response on the chat window.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm just streaming it live on Facebook, so just to let you know.
Okay. And then you want me to share my screen right after the introduction, or do you want to put the screen up?
You can test it right now. I've allowed you to share the screen, so you can actually share your screen
Right now?
And you,
Okay.
yeah, we can test it.
All right, let's do. All right, did you get them up okay? Do you have the slides up?
You want me to put up the slides?
No, I put them up. Do you have them? Can you see them?
No.
Okay, I better try it again. Something didn't work right. Let's do it again. Screen share. Screen share. Slideshow.
I'm just stopping my video for some time.
All right, how about that? No slides, huh? Can you see them?
No, you have not yet shared your screen.
You still don't see slides, huh?
No, I don't.
What the heck?
Anybody else seeing the slides?
All right, let's try it again. All right, let's see this.
So on the bottom, you see the option share screen, which is a green
Yeah,
icon.
yep,
You click on that, and then you go to your desktop, and you select the file. It will open up.
yep. That's what I'm doing right now. All right, now you should see them now.
Okay.
Still nothing, huh? What
No,
the heck? Never had this problem before.
maybe you can just switch off your video and then try your share. Probably it's taking the bandwidth. I'm not sure, but you can try that.
All right, let me see. Okay.
Yes.
Got them?
Yeah, it started showing this. I can see a blank. Yes, yes, yes. It's on.
Okay, you should be getting them now. Are they coming up?
Yes, Lee, we can see the first screen, which is basically the topic of today.
Good, good.
So we are on mute. I'll keep it on mute, and we will start in next 8 minutes from now.
Okay, and I'll just leave my slides up, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. See you in 8 minutes. Don't forget me.
Sure, sure. I'm here. I'm just admitting everybody into the room. We've kept the waiting room
Okay,
off.
good.
I'm admitting people slowly. Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Manoj Sarsapan. Welcome to today's PM Forum, which is a webinar by Mr. Lee Lambert. Good morning, Lee. Thank you for taking your time out today to address the most important topic today on strategic design and project delivery, bridging the gap. I'll start in a couple of minutes. I'll just wait for some more time. There are about 30 participants right now, and I can see people are adding in. I would request everybody to be on mute, and any questions you have, you can put it in the chat window towards the end of the session so that Lee can look at it and respond to your queries, your questions. In the meanwhile, those who have attended, those who are attending, who have logged in, please put in your attendance, your PMI ID and your email ID so that we can send you the mail or the PDUs.
Let's go on this end.
Yes, Manoj.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for confirming. So it's already 7 o'clock our time, so let's start. So good morning, Lee, and good evening, friends. Today's speaker is Mr. Lee R. Lambert. He's the CEO of Lambert Consulting Group. Lee Lambert has logged in about 50 plus years of project management experience and is considered one of the world's thought leaders on project management methods and how they can be utilized to create and sustain value-added leadership and collaboration capabilities. He's only one of few 70 people in the world to receive the honor of PMI Fellow. Lee is the past president of Central Ohio PMI chapter and was one of the founders of Project Management Institute's project management professional, that is a PMP credential. His book, Project Management, The Common Sense Approach, is a bestseller in the field. At the age of 37, Lee was named VP of Staff and Organization Development for one of the world's largest contract research organizations, responsible for creating and implementing a leadership development program focused on improved performance for project managers and supporting functional and line managers. During his decades of platform training, Mr. Lambert has provided learning opportunities to more than 50,000 professionals in 23 countries. He is regularly called upon to provide keynote presentations on leadership, communications, and other project management topics. Before his years as Vice President, Mr. Lee was a project management evangelist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and at GE Electric. Over to you, Lee.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction. That topic has really piqued my interest a couple of months, and thinking about what I wanted to do to kind of give back to the profession, I came up with this crazy idea of providing free webinars to any PMI chapter who requested it. Little did I realize I'm at about 57, 58 chapters right now in so many different countries, I can't keep track of them all. And so we definitely hit a chord. Now, what I did was I tried to sort through. I couldn't offer a variety of topics to all these chapters because they'd have different requests and we'd get very confused. So I had to decide on what topic is sort of hot, if you will, and what topic is being talked about a lot and discussed in project management circles. And this is what I came up with, this whole idea of the strategic linkage. Our projects need to be tied to and linked to the strategy that an organization develops in order to be successful. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to sort of expand on that thinking and kind of get down to the real world of application of this concept of strategic design and project delivery. So we took a look at what's out there. And one of the things that caught my attention, and I think some of you have had a chance to meet Sunil Prashar, the new CEO of PMI, but one of the things that he is touting, he's talking about, he's writing about quite a bit, is something he's called the project economy. He sort of rolled this idea out in a big way at the National Symposium, the Global Congress actually in Philadelphia last year, where suddenly, basically what he's trying to say, at least this is my interpretation, I don't want to put words in Sunil's mouth, is that everything is a project. Everything we do in an organization has some relevance to what it is we're trying to accomplish as an organization. In other words, projects, when completed, add value to the organization. In about 1981 or so, a fellow by the name of Paul Dinsmore, who's also one of the very few PMI fellows, he works out of Rio de Janeiro, but he's actually from Houston here in the United States. A good friend of mine, he put out a book. He authored a book in the early 80s that the title was Managing Organizations by Project. And that was the first time I'd been introduced to this idea that, hey, there's some reason why we're doing these projects. It's not just for the fun of it. There's some value to completing these projects. And that's what he was saying. He was saying that organizations are just made up of a microcosm of projects. Well, unfortunately, he was way ahead of his time. We weren't ready in the field to embrace this kind of thinking. And so the book didn't sell as well as it should have, and it certainly didn't get implemented in the way that it potentially could have. So now we've circled back, and now we're back to this idea that every project has a contribution to make to the organizational success and or failure. So that's what I want to talk about. I'm going to spend some time chatting with you about how we can accomplish this more effectively. I think the project management role is a significant contributor to the potential success of an organization. I think we have much more to add in value to organizations than I think we give ourselves credit for. So I want to take a look at how this all fits together. And remember, hold your questions till the end. I did a program here for Singapore about 2-3 days ago, and they had 87 questions, and we tried to cover them all, but we do have some time limitations. So, but I want you to go away from here without having questions unanswered. So be thinking about that as we move through the material today. So let's take a look at the environment first of all. When we look at today's environment, it's pretty intense for a project manager. We find that we're in a situation where it seems as though the organization is taking on more things to do, more strategic objectives are being defined in the CEO, CIO, CFO, COO. At the C level, they're defining all of these strategic objectives in order to meet revenue targets or product sales or cost reduction, all the various reasons why we set out a strategic objective. And therefore, those roll into, they spawn, if you can use that term, they spawn projects. Out of strategic objectives come projects. You get projects via a mechanism that PMI calls in the PMBOK a charter document that basically outlines the fundamentals of the project and actually transfers the responsibility for the project to the project manager. Well, it used to be pretty easy to handle that. When I was working in project management with General Electric in the 60s and 70s, when I got a project, I got a documentation of the project transfer, but along with that came the assignment of resources that were dedicated to getting that project done. So we started the project, we planned the project, we executed the project, we knew what resources we had, and we used them to the greatest effect of the organization. Well, those days are long gone. If you're working on a project right now that you're a dedicated team working with you, I can tell you, you know right away, you are on what I call a hot project. It's got a lot of attention. It's got a lot of significance in terms of providing support of our strategic objectives. And but don't hold your breath, because those are very far and few and far between. If we look at the way we do business now in a matrix environment. We've got these, I'm going to call them silos. That term catches on. We've got these silos of, say, engineers and chemists and electricians and quality, all the different silos of resource support it takes to get a project done. And then we have to, as project managers, determine what resources we need and then draw down on that resource pool to get what we need to get the job done. And that's pretty straightforward. I don't have a problem with that, except if we've got more projects than we have resources, now we find ourselves in a battle for who gets what resource. And I'm going to tell you right now, your biggest advantage in this battle for resources is understanding where you fit in the organizational's strategic objective order. In other words, how important is your project? That's your leverage. That's your influence capability to get what you need to get your project done. It changed even more from that when we started seeing more and more, and now almost completely encapsulated the IT environment with the Agile concept. The Agile concept, of course, is incremental. It's evolutionary requirements, and so we're not planning till the end of the project, and so we've segmented it into pieces, and those pieces, those that deliver usable software, they like to say that, those pieces as they come out of a project can actually be incorporated into the strategic objectives. So the world's changing, but the fact of the matter is, none of these changes eliminate the need to understand why you're doing your project. So a lot of people don't get it. What strategy? It seems so simple. Strategy is that. Here's what it is. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's strategy is strategy. Is how are we going to do what we need to do to reach our objectives, to reach our organizational improvement. And so when they go away and do these meetings, and they usually go someplace where it's nice and quiet with sun and surf so that they can think more clearly, what they're going for, what the CIO level, C-level is going for, is to determine what does this organization need to do in the coming year to continue to be successful in the environment that we work in. So that's basically what they do. And they spend a lot of time trading off, looking at what's the biggest return on investment, what's the most value add. And eventually they come up with a list of projects that will need to be done to support the strategic objective. So if it's sales, if it's profitability, if it's reduction in cost to produce, whatever those objectives are, those strategic objectives, they spawn these projects, okay? And so that's what we're looking at. So everything that we do in our organization has some relationship to the strategy. Now, some of the relationships are much more significant than others, but we have to understand that the strategy is what's it going to take to be successful. That's what organizations do. And then the implementers, the people who determine whether we're really going to accomplish that or not, are you and me and the project management people and individual contributors too that have to get this project done. So here's what my recommendation is to you to get off on the right foot. What you don't want to do is not have the facts. You want to have the facts. When you get a charter, for example, the PMI charter document, it's changed over the years. We introduced the first one in 1996 in the PMBOK first edition, and it's changed over time, as you might imagine. And one of the things that I think has not been incorporated in the change, at least not the last one I saw, is that when you get a charter document, one of the very first things you as a project manager must do, it's not optional, must do, is ask someone, where does this project fit in the strategic objective priorities? You need to know this. This is an important piece of information that everyone should have when we start to go into this project process. Again, working at GE, I was involved in their business planning, high-level business planning out time frame. And so they put together a document that listed about 25, what they called at the time, mission critical projects. Mission critical, that sort of says they're important, mission critical projects. And so they wanted me to review them to be sure that they had considered everything they needed to in the creation of this mission critical documentation. So I reviewed the document and I was impressed. Again, GE's a great organization. I spent 11 years with them. I learned a lot of what I know today from GE. But I looked at this and the description of the projects were quite well done, very definitive in terms of brief description. They'd taken a quick shot at time and money, and so they had 25 of these things defined. And I looked through them, and all of them were really quite well done and well defined. And so I got all done with that. I said, this looks great, except I need to know what's the prioritization of these 25. And they said, what do you mean prioritization? I said, well, what order of importance are they to the organization in terms of value add or return on investment or whatever you're measuring, whatever metric you're using, whatever KPI you're using, where do they fit? They said, oh, well, that's on page 2. So I turned over to page 2, and sure enough, they were listed 25 projects. Every single one of them was priority 1. And I just shook my head and I said, look, guys, you know better than this. I said, you can't have more than one priority 1. And so you need to really regroup this, because for project management people to assume that their project priority number 1 and find out later it's number 24 has a big impact on how they're able to execute the project. So go ahead and rethink this. Put them in from a business perspective, from a strategic objective perspective, put them in the priority order that you feel is important. And so they took about a week to do that, and then they called me back in and gave me the document. I could tell it was revised because I remember the first 4 or 5 in the order they were, and that had been changed. They were not the same 4 or 5 that I'd seen before. So that was refreshing. It looked like maybe they'd taken me seriously. And I said, well, then so priorities on page 2. And they said, yeah, that's right, same as before. So I turned to page 2, and to GE's credit, this was they had taken a serious attempt at prioritization, and I looked at it and I was so excited to see this being done correctly. So I looked at the project number 1, and to the side of it, they had priority 1. So project 1 on the list was priority 1. That makes sense. That's the way it should be. So then we go down to project number 2, and project number 2's priority was 1A. And project number 3 was 1B, and so on. So they hadn't done a darn thing. They hadn't done it. And here's my point to you. If you want to empower yourself, and that's, I went up projects, organizations quickly because we got things done that added value. We didn't just get things done. We got things done that supported strategic objectives. That gets visibility. That gets reward. And so we looked at that and said, okay, we need to make sure we know that so that we know how much leverage we have in the negotiation for resources, because that's one of the big things you'll spend time on as a project manager in a matrix environment, is negotiating for the resources. So pull your head out of the sand, ask questions. Here's what I tell my people. When you get a project, start asking questions. Keep asking questions. In fact, ask questions until someone asks you to stop asking questions. Now you know you're onto something. So it's an iterative process. You've got to talk to people. You've got to involve those C-level people so that we make sure we're all on the same page and we're all moving in the right direction. If you don't do that, this is what will happen. This is basically the GE model at the time I reviewed their package of business critical or mission critical. So you look at this and you look at the CIO in this case, or maybe it's a CFO or COO or whatever C-level it is, and they're going to say, my project's priority 1. My project's priority 1. And that could be true, by the way, in each one of those independent silos. That project might be number 1. But the problem is we are not horizontally integrating. Vertically, we integrate pretty well, but horizontally, we don't integrate. So a project number 1 in the engineering silo might be number 4 when it comes to the business operations silo. So we've got to look at it from that perspective and be able to understand there can't be all number 1s, so someone has to make a decision. Management doesn't like to do this because it leads to accountability, and they want to be careful with that because sometimes they can't be sure that they're going to be successful, so they certainly don't want to be held accountable. And sometimes that rolls down to, guess who? The project manager. So I want to eliminate that possibility by doing all of the right things. And what we're trying to do with this idea is create a linkage between the tactical projects being executed and the strategic objectives that they support. Now remember, one strategic objective could have 4 or 5 or 6 or more projects that support the achievement of that objective. So I'll give you an easy example. I was hired by a medical diagnostics firm out of Indiana to lead a team of people to create a new product and have it in the marketplace in 18 months. Now, the original timing was estimated to be 3 years, but we found out because of a competitor's new product, we were getting killed in the marketplace. So we had to expedite down to 18 months, okay? And so my job was to get that done. And so the strategic objective was to deliver a new, better, faster, cheaper product. And this is blood glucose monitoring for in-home diabetic use. I'm diabetic. I happen to use the very product that I manage this project for. But the fact of the matter is, it was made up of a lot of different projects. Sometimes we refer to these as a portfolio with all the subordinate linked projects underneath the portfolio. Sometimes we call it a program with a bunch of projects. Well, but it's a strategic objective. And now I look at this and, like, for example, we had to design and build a new electronic meter. We had to design and build a new carrier strip to carry the blood into the system. We had to design the accessories, the carrying case, and so on. And so you begin to see, well, the linkage here is vertically all three of those that I just named are tied to the strategic objective, but in fact, all of them will need to be done if we are to claim success in that strategic objective. Well, just sort of understand how it works, and I've sort of made this was a miracle project. Okay? It's written up by PMI in a magazine. It's a big deal, and the reason it's a big deal is we got it done in 18 months. Okay, went back into the marketplace with a new product, completely hammered the market, just captured market share at massive amounts right away. And 3 years after we delivered that project to the marketplace, this $1 billion a year German-owned company was acquired by Roche Laboratories for $11 billion 3 years later. So we got it done. We met the strategic objective. Now, I never saw, of course, I was a consultant being hired in. I never saw anything in the strategic objective that says sell the company, prepare to sell the company. But when you look back at it, it certainly could have been, because creating this magical project and creating this product that has such a big marketplace, maybe that is an objective. I mean, the Engelhorn family in Mannheim, Germany, are certainly not complaining that they sold the company for $11 billion. So the strategic objectives, though, can be made up, the ability to meet them can be made up of multiple projects. So we have to be sure we understand the integration of all of those various projects to meet the needs of the organization. And in order to do that, we have to have a clear understanding of who are all the stakeholders. Who are all the stakeholders? So I've created a kind of a hierarchy that I always use when I get a new project. I immediately do a stakeholder study. So I define who are all the stakeholders, what are their stakes, and how do I want to best communicate with them. And that's dependent upon where they are in the hierarchy. So I start at the top with what I call control stakeholders. These are people who can stop or start your project. Some of these will be on the charter document, some of them will not be, but they still have the ability to stop or start your project. So what that implies is we need to keep them up to speed. They need to be aware of what's going on, what's working, what isn't working. So we communicate with the control stakeholders at a high level. They don't want to be buried in detail, but we communicate with them so that there can be clarity on what the project's doing. Then we have the impact or influence stakeholders, and that's all of us. That's the project team, the individual contributors, the support staff, anybody who's going to have some ability to impact performance or cost of our project. Those are impact or influence stakeholders. So I want to know who they are, and I want to know what's the best way to communicate with them. In the PMBOK, you know this, it says we need a communications plan. Well, the stakeholder management idea is one of the leading edges of communication plan. So we have that. Now the third one is an interesting one called interested stakeholders. Okay, these aren't control stakeholders, they aren't impact stakeholders, they're interested stakeholders. And so we need to identify who they are, because they can, when their interests are not satisfied, they can actually elevate into impact or influence stakeholders. And so we want to make sure that we keep them up to speed. It's an important role, and it's one that a lot of people don't even think about. Well, I don't care who's interested. If you're not participating on the project, I'm not going to worry about you. Well, that might be a big mistake. You may have opportunities to take advantage of that. Let me give you a simple example. Well, it's not simple. It's an $11 billion example. The blood chemistry that we came up with for that new project was not developed by my project chemists. I had 25 chemists working on the project, coming up with this new carrier strip and chemistry composition. but it wasn't them that came up with the system it was the non-project chemists. There were about 75 of them because they had other projects they're working on. And so I'd have a brown bag lunch with them. My chemists get together with their chemists. No specific agenda, just chit chat about what's working, what isn't working, what are you doing now, what do you think you're going to be doing. And then finally we had to get on to the project, obviously. Well, I've never really told a lot of people, but the fact of the matter is the chemistry that led to an $11 billion acquisition was actually developed by the interested stakeholders, the non-project chemists. That's a pretty strong example. I don't know if you'll ever have one quite that significant, but the fact of the matter is that that company would most likely be out of business now had we not been communicating with the interested stakeholders. So prepare the stakeholder management study, prepare the information of how to communicate and with whom to communicate. And so that's something we have to pay some serious attention to, is making sure that we've covered all of those categories as we move forward in this process. So in order to help you do that, and this is what we're here, you know, how many times you heard that? We're here to help. Well, in order to help you, the profession has determined that what you need are more tools. And so we spend inordinate amounts of time developing and creating and implementing and redeveloping and re-implementing the tools of the trade. But I'm a simplistic person, okay? And I've been told that by many people. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think it's brain surgery. I just don't think it's that complicated. I think we make it overcomplicated to the detriment of the success. So there's three things that I, as a professional in this business for an awfully long time, want to suggest to you that you do not do any project without these three. Now, you're going to add others as you see fit, but these three are critical. Number one, work breakdown structure, WBS, been around since the 50s, introduced by the Department of Defense in the United States environment. And basically it says we're going to take a project from its very top deliverable and we're going to hierarchically decompose it lower and lower until I get to what PMI calls work packages. And what we need to understand is the work package level, wherever that level is, the work package level is the only place actual physical work gets accomplished. Everything above it is summarization, is rolling up the hierarchy to finished product. So down at the working level, now I've got the skeleton that creates the ability for me to hang everything else on it. I call the WBS the foundation of all things project management. So if you don't have a well-developed WBS, you're off on the wrong start. You're off to a bad start right away. I'll go into an organization, I'll say, do you have a WBS? Oh, absolutely, we do. I said, can I see it? And so they bring me a bar chart schedule. Well, I got to tell you, that's not a WBS. I want to break that work down because you see, once I have it broken down to work packages, I start to select skill set match resources. I cost out the cost of those resources. I look at other issues associated with that, things like risk, things like schedule connections. Those are things I must take into consideration. And now I've broken that WBS down to a level where I can get my hands around it. PMI has always used a sort of a rule of thumb of 80 hours of effort. It makes a reasonable good size work package. What they mean by that is keep them small so that you can measure success or failure. Don't have a big one that you don't know if you didn't make it till you get to the end. Have small pieces that you can determine right away if you're on or off schedule and do what you need to do about it. Okay, that's number one, WBS. Number two is a critical path schedule, CPM. Okay, now PMI's endorsed the Precedent Diagram method. where you put the work in a box and you connect the boxes. It's that simple. I don't want to make it sound any more difficult, but what we've got to make sure we show is what are the precedent relationships. When work package A finishes, where does it go? What is it an input to? And we're going to walk that from left to right, from start to finish, connecting all of the work packages until we get to the end. Once we have that, then we can do a calculation of forward pass and backward pass based on the fact we've assigned effort hours or duration hours, depending on how you're thinking it, to each of the work packages. We can now do a forward pass and a backward pass, and the result of that, of course, is our critical path. Critical in that everything on that path needs to be done when it says it'll be done, or it'll impact the schedule. Now, here's what you got to understand, and this is something I don't think people really get. The non-critical path, the float paths, there's always a 70% more float path than there is critical path. This is your prerogative to utilize your flexibility in the allocation of resources. If you have a weak float, you can use that weak float, moving a resource around, and not impact the delivery schedule. So it gives you that knowledge and understanding of how much freedom do I have to manipulate the way I'm executing the work. So critical path schedule, CPM. Again, precedent diagram method is the endorsed approach that PMI has suggested. And then the third thing, which kind of links into both of the first two, is a very comprehensive risk assessment. Because what's going to go wrong are things that you could and probably should anticipate and be prepared to deal with that to minimize the impact on the project. So WBS, critical path schedule, risk assessment. And I mean risk assessment in its totality. What's the risk event? What's the probability? What's the impact? How am I going to deal with it? And that's recorded and kept records of. And when you get a risk defined, you assign it to someone to complete. If I go into an organization, I say, you doing risk management? See how we do. Look, can I see what you got? She brings me a risk management register, a risk register. And I look at it, and they got like 35, 40 different risks identified and briefly described. I said, well, that's good. That gives you a good understanding. I said, now, what do you do with this now? And she said, well, nothing. We just keep kind of a running track of the risks that we've gotten. Well, they missed the boat. Anybody that knows anything about risk, if you got the risk management credential, you know what I'm talking about. This is a very, very critical element of project management, because all of these things I'm talking about will prepare you to maintain and improve the strategic linkage you have with your project to the value of the organization. So you've got to make sure that we understand that. And we've changed the tools over time. For example, we used to use something we called, I think we call it waterfall. The old waterfall methodology. Now, some of you may be old enough to remember when this was the way IT projects were done. And there's still some waterfall guys hanging around, old guys like me hanging around. And some organizations, they actually have segmented their IT organization into waterfall, and then of course the fantastic Agile hybrid approach. So we still got that going on, but the waterfall was much more predictive than the Agile people like, and so we've seen a gradual movement towards that. Some of you, I hope some of you in the audience probably have your PMP. That's my claim to fame. And I bet some of you have also gotten your Scrum Master certificate. Now, if you haven't, I recommend that, because that combination, PMP and Scrum Master, that sets you up for opportunities in the future. We can't become too reliant on one process over another. Remember that we've got a changing world. The PMP is changing in terms of the exam. Sorry, I should be specific here. You can take the old exam until January 1st of the next year. The new exam reflects the new PMBOK. 7th edition of the PMBOK makes a massive modification to content, and we'll now see that 50% of the PMBOK in the 7th edition will be made up of Agile Hybrid information. The other 50% will still reside in the predictive role. And so it's changed massively, and we need to make sure that we stay abreast of that. The Scrum Master usurps many of the duties that were previously held by the project manager. So we've got to be careful in how we analyze and pursue the best approach for us personally to maintain this linkage with the strategy of the organization. So what we've seen the environment go to is rugby. Yeah, if y'all play rugby now, I know you. I see down at Nationwide Insurance here in Columbus, Ohio. They have actually created a cricket field. And I like to go down and watch them play cricket. I'm a baseball guy myself, and so I have a little trouble understanding what the heck's going on out there. But cricket. So, well, also there's another game called rugby, and this is to me most reflective of Agile. In fact, I think the terminology, some of the terminology for Agile really is a direct outcropping of the game of rugby. So if you look at this example, one of the strengths, there's two things I think are, well, maybe three, that are strengths for the project manager or the scrum master in maintaining linkage with the strategy of the organization. That's because rather than attempt to define requirements in totality from the start to the finish, and the idea of Agile is very much like a scrum where they throw the ball in the middle of scrum, everybody's pushing and shoving and yelling and screaming, and all of a sudden out squirts the requirements and somebody picks it up and runs with it. Well, that's kind of what we're doing with Scrum. We're trying to get some things done in a short period of time. We have stand-up meetings daily that all the right stakeholders are included in the stand-up meetings. We do retrospectives to determine what we've learned from the most recent activity, and we get in these stand-up meetings, and they don't last long. They last less than an hour in almost every case, and all the stakeholders are there. It's mandatory. They need to be there because they may impact the project. And so we have these meetings, and when we look at that, the beauty of it to me, I see, again, adapting my predictive thinking, is that what I end up with these daily stand-ups is a daily, I'll call it closeout, because that's what we call it in the PMBOK, but daily opportunities to create lessons learned. So we don't wait till a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months has gone by before we figure out where'd we run into problems. We're doing that on a daily basis. This is awesome. This is awesome. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. And if I don't get to eat breakfast until 6 months from now, I could starve to death. So what we want to do is give that feedback so that we can make conscious decisions about how this project is evolving. So Agile Hybrid, you're going to hear it tell you, it's kind of running out your ears. Agile Hybrid. We've incorporated a lot of Agile in the current discussions we have at PMI, and I think it's a very important component part of how we're going to manage projects, how we're going to maintain strategic linkage. And when I say all the stakeholders participate, what I mean by that is all the stakeholders participate. So the strategic objective owner may well be one of the parties that are contributing to your stand-up meetings. So remember, you set the agenda, you get the people there. It's not an inordinate amount of time they have to devote, but it saves the project lots and lots of effort in terms of getting things done in a more timely way. So Agile, here to stay. If you don't know a lot about it, you better find out, because it's going to be something you need to demonstrate for people in the future. Now, here's the problem. I mean, I've made this sound easy. That's what I do because it was easy to me, but I didn't have all the tools that you have to do it. We had to do it the old-fashioned way. When I was at GE, the tool I used most often was, this is in 1966, was paper and pencil. That was my tool of choice. Well, now you've got this box jam-packed with tools and techniques and concepts and processes, and you need to be wise enough to understand which ones of these do I want to utilize to most effectively achieve project success, and therefore support the strategic objectives of the organization. Well, it's easier for you to understand because you've got a lot of the pieces in front of you. You know how it can fit together. For management, they're looking at this as, whoa, this will take a lot of work to do this. This idea, maybe we just ought to go back to the old way. Well, the old way is not going to be successful. The old way is going to leave a lot of organizations on the heap of dead plans and activities. We've got to understand it's an integrated piece. It is a big enchilada. It's a big job. If it were easy, we wouldn't call it work. And so we've got to be the one to convince management of the return on the investment, both of money and time and dedication and training and all the things that go along with it to ultimately get to where you can do that. A lot of organizations now are feeling that they can just buy a PPM off the shelf, plug it in, and they're ready to go. Well, if you've ever done that, you know right away that there's no such thing as plug and play in terms of PPM. So there's a lot of them out there. I've been working with a company in Ireland called Chorus Systems. I like what they've got. I've had demonstrations several times, so that's one. But there's so many. There's just a plethora of these opportunities out there to integrate the organization vertically, hierarchically, and horizontally integrate the multiple capacity capabilities of the organization. So you've got to be prepared to be a salesperson. You got to sell people on the idea. You can't just wait. If you sit back and wait till it happens, there's a good chance it won't happen. And so we need to be the driver. We need to be the instigator of the importance of linking these individual projects directly to the strategic objective that they support. Now, you'll have some choices along the way, and one of those choices is to do nothing. One of those choices is to continue to do what you've been doing for all these years. Now, I got to tell you, if I had taken that attitude when things started to move from 66 to 76 to 86 to 96, if I'd have taken that approach, I'd be dust right now. There's no way I could have stayed ahead of the power curve of project management without understanding and utilizing all of the available opportunities to improve how well I can do my job. So I really suggest you give serious thought to going back. In fact, here I'll leave you with this and then we'll take questions. What I'm going to suggest you do is go back to your organization, get your project, whatever project you're working on right now, and go talk to the owner of the strategic objective. Go find out who it is that's responsible for that and ask them specifically, what's the linkage? Where does my project fit in your strategic objective? Now, I'm going to tell you, we did a survey recently in one of these workshops, and 87% of the people said they could tell me what strategic objective their project supported. Well, that's fantastic. I've never heard a number that high. And this was in London. So the number was high. I was shocked. If you know where your projects fit in the strategic objective hierarchy, then you're already ahead of the game. If you don't, you need to find out. So plan on doing that first thing when you get back and see what you get back from your objective owner. The strategy is hallowed ground and they're reluctant to share it, but you need it in order to be successful. Okay, that's all of my formal presentation. And so what I'd like to do now is take any questions you might have and see if I can come up with some answers for you. Okay, well, let's see what we got here. We got a few questions, 76, I think, to be exact. Let me see what I can do here. I'm getting, whoa, we lost the screen somehow. Let me get it back. Let me get it back, see what I can do here. Okay, I'm just going to pick some of these. Oh, I see. Some of these are just statements. Same priorities. Yeah, this is an important one. I'm just sort of randomly picking them here, so we certainly don't have time to do 76. But if I look at this one says, this is from Rupa, says setting priorities becomes difficult. Everything is a priority. Any tips on how to bring about everyone to think about prioritizing? Yeah, the technique that I use is being able to demonstrate to the owner of a project or of a strategic objective, but primarily a project that I'm working on, is I try to demonstrate to them what the impact on them, in other words, what's in it for them, the owner of the strategic objective. And what's in it for them also implies what there won't be in it for them if they don't get done. So in other words, I try to personalize it. So it's about an individual considering, if I do this, this happens. If I do that, that happens, and determining which of those makes the most sense from their own personal perspective. Because you're dead right. Everything's number one in the eyes of management. Someone has to realize we need to recognize what the value add calculation is for any given project, and if nothing else, use that as your prioritization technique. So if a project's going to return 3 to 1 on the investment and another project's going to return 1.5 to 1, well, pretty easy to identify priorities in those two. And so we have to do that right away. So when I say ask about what it supports, the additional thing that you must ask is how was that prioritization determined, or how was that return on investment determined that throws it into the strategic objective category. Once you know how that was calculated, then you can demonstrate what the impact will be. All right, in an environment where teams are created from bringing people from different departments who also have regular jobs, how do we go about doing a balancing act, running business and ensuring project delivery? So one of the biggest problems we have in our organizations today, we've gone to this matrix environment where a certain skill set, in addition to their daily job, let's say it's maintenance and operation, in addition to their 30% of their time that's dedicated to maintenance and operation, they're also being assigned to projects. And what happens is they get assigned to projects 100% of the time. We create schedules based on that commitment, and then we find out that they're really only available 70% of the time, and they're really only available less than that because they're not only just working on your project, they're working on 2 other people's projects. So now they're really only available about 30% of the time, and your schedule just elongated by twice. We have to communicate that. This idea, I get this constantly from people saying, well, when do they ever take into account that 30% of my time is non-productive, ongoing maintenance and operation? Well, the answer is never, unless somebody calls them out. If you don't let them know what the impact of that is. So what we do is we enter into a free lunch program where all of us rise to a higher level of performance. Instead of working 8 hours a day, now we're working 12 hours a day. But by golly, we're getting it done. Well, the fact of the matter is that can only go on so long before it dies of its own weight. So we've got to draw out clarification. Where are people spending their time? And if it's 30% of maintenance operation, non-productive time, we got to take that away from their availability. And if you don't do that, you're heading for the abyss. You're going to have problems from the beginning of the project on. And we need to communicate this to decision makers, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to lose if our project is late by that factor of maintenance and operation availability. Their project, they own the project too, because it's part of their strategic objective. So we need to communicate the real world, not stick your head in the sand. I showed you that already. You got to communicate the real world and be ready to illustrate it. What if the project owners have contradicting priorities? What shall PM do to handle delicate situations? Also, what if project owners are not able to clearly link the project objectives to the organizational strategic objectives? Okay, that's about 4 questions in one. And so what we have to understand is you're always going to get, if you have dual or tri ownership, you're always going to get contradicting priorities. And all you can do is, from a project management perspective, present the case for each of those priorities, what it will take to achieve it, and so that they can decide among themselves. You can't make the decision. You're an expediter. You're not a organizational strategic thinker. You run tactical projects, okay? And so that's what you've got to do. You can't take sides. You can't decide, well, I really like owner number one. You've got to present it as it is, and then be able to do that. So now, what if the project owners are not able to clearly link the project objective? This is the easiest question of the day. If they can't link the project objectives to the organizational strategic objectives, here's my suggestion: stop the project. What the hell are we doing the project for if we can't link it to some strategic objective? Because everything we do in our organization has some linkage to the sustainability of that organization itself. Well, Priya has a comment. She's always on top of this, got good comments. She said she would use an influence impact matrix. I love matrices, and I love to be able to say, look, here's how much influence you have. This kind of goes back to your stakeholder analysis, because when we look at those stakeholders, remember the biggest group of stakeholders are the influence stakeholders, and then we can look at what, if that influence activity doesn't take place, what's the impact on the project going to be? Beautiful tool. Anytime you can create a matrix that draws these components together, the better off you'll be. All right. Agile methodology is different than traditional, no doubt about that, wherein we follow a process of change management to manage changes, contractual requirements, especially in an EPC project execution. That's one of the changing elements of going from predictive model with sort of hard-based plans that are entered into from a contractual standpoint. And once that goes baseline, you're all familiar with the term performance measurement baseline, and then we rigidly control that baseline. So every time something happens that I need to make a change, then I have to go through the bureaucratic process of review and authorization and implementation. We try to get away from that by using the evolutionary approach to admit going up front, there's going to be change. It's part of the project. So every time we have to implement a change, we don't want to have to go through the bureaucracy of getting approval. It's built into the methodology that we're using. So it's a very different contractual mode. And what we found as problems in some cases is some of the people who are running organizations that have a high usage of Agile are still living in the predictive model environment. So we have to make sure we educate them in that regard as well. Let's see. Oh, okay. Here's one. This is a private one, so we can't tell you who. I guess they don't want to be held accountable. How to involve higher management in project and convince that project is important from organizational perspective. Well, this is where you get into that silo fight. Every silo thinks their project's the most important. So at that high level, that horizontal integration needs to take place, and someone at the high level has to make a prioritization call. This would typically be the CEO or the president of the company. He's presented with 5 or 6 different objectives that are all considered to be important, and he or she needs to make the call on what the priority order needs to be. And that's one of their important roles that they need to play, is to be able to do that so that we understand what's important and what is less important. They're all important, but some are more important than others. The second part of that question is one I love. It says, why management doesn't empower project managers to drive and lead the project matrix organization? Wow. Listen, if we could come up with the answer to that, we could have enough project management support to take over the world. The reason they don't empower you is they don't trust you. they're more confident in themselves and their ability to shepherd projects to completion than they are with the project manager. It flies right in the face of the idea of project manager. As I said, back at GE, when I got a project, they gave me a team of people and they gave me the authority to do what needed to be done. As long as I stayed within the organizational strategic objectives, I had the freedom to do what I needed to do. Very rare does that happen. They don't empower project managers because they don't want to give away authority. So if you find yourself in that position and you don't get the authority, you don't get what you'd like to have and think you need to do a cause and effect analysis. If you don't give me the authority, we're going to get a 30-day delay in decision making, and that's going to impact the schedule and so on. Something that you can illustrate as an impact. Now you got to remember, trust isn't given. Trust is earned. So in the beginning, you won't have trust. I didn't have it when I started, but the more success I demonstrated, the more trust I got to where pretty much as a fly-by-myself opportunity every time I got a project. But you got to earn it. Trust is not given, it is earned. Looks like that's about all I've got on my screen right here. If there are others, go ahead and post them. I'll be happy to respond. Oh, here's one about the COVID-19. I got to tell you, I don't know how bad y'all got hit in your part of the world, but we got nailed pretty hard. We got a lot of people, and you know, it's changed a lot of things that we do. I think we sort of got caught what we call in America with our pants down. We sort of end up having to react in the COVID-19 arena, but frankly, I'm getting kind of sick of hearing about it because I think people are beginning to use it as a rationale for failed performance, as a rationale for not doing some of the things we should be doing. So my feedback on COVID-19 is get back to what you were doing, get back there as quickly as you can, begin to build your networks, and understand that there will be things that impact us like COVID-19, and all we can do is adjust. Remember, that's what project managers do. They take the situation, they analyze the future, and they adjust accordingly. One last one, it looks like here. In long-term projects, particularly infrastructure or government projects, priorities keep changing. It's very challenging for the PM for such project balance between deliveries and managing resources. Well, you could have made that a true-false question. And the answer is true. And it's not any different really with government projects as it is with corporate projects, because what we have seen in the U.S. over the last, 5 or 10 years even, is that there is just a constant churn in turnover when it comes to senior level executives. CEO, CIO, CIO's big one, turns over more frequently almost than anything I've seen. I was working with Microsoft over in Redmond, Washington, and a guy named Tony Scott was the CIO, built a relationship with him, just started moving, and then next thing I know, he's out selling cars somewhere. So this is going to happen with every organization, and all you can do is be flexible, adapt to the environment, but it's not going to stop, and you're not going to stop it for sure. All right, I think that's going to wrap us up for today. In case any of you are interested, I'm going to be doing one of these for Mumbai on the 14th. So you're welcome to rejoin. Unfortunately, fortunately for you, it's not the same topic. It's a leadership topic. I did something special for Monica. She's a special person. I did something special for her so that we weren't redundant in providing the same material to the same audience. So I'll be doing the name of the program is Leadership. Don't leave home without it. So if you get a chance to join the Pearl City chapter on the 14th, I'd welcome you to join us.
Hi Manoj, we can't hear you.
No, I was waiting for a response from everybody. So, Lee, thank you so much. We had a wonderful session today. There was a great learning, and I'm sure we'll all take some, thoughts and feedback and some learnings. Whatever you give us today will help us in our day-to-day work going forward. Anybody would like to, have any personal questions or any other thing directed to Lee, you can mark a mail to me, and I will ensure that Lee reverts to your questions.
I appreciate you having me today. I've been looking forward to this program for.
Thank you so much, Lee. You have a wonderful day. And friends, thank you for joining today. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye and stay safe.